Happy Sunday, everybody. At the end of the week, I like to go over the off-meta picks that I noticed in Mythic. And so this is week 6 of Outlaws of Thunder Junction, or at least the end of it. And so this was kind of like the last-minute climbs into Mythic at the end of the May season. And we saw some interesting innovation, so I was pretty excited for this week's episode. So first up on the list here is Jeskai Convoke, and this was run by O. Pippin for a 65% win rate, 77 and 41. And the idea being basically Boros Convoke, but adding blue for Spyglass Siren, which can give us that map token, similar to the Voldarian Epicure and the Novice Inspector, just giving us another target for the Gleeful Demolition. And then Tishana's Tidebinder, which makes it a little bit better against the Convoke matchup. And so I'm kind of curious to see how this one does, and I think the fixing actually supports it because we got the Inspiring Vantage in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, as well as the Spire Bluff Canal. So both of the fast lands, I think, make the Jeskai space a little bit more viable. I'm not certain that adding blue, because you're going to lose some consistency, and I'm not sure that the Spyglass Siren and Tishana's Tidebinder is enough, say, over the Sanguine Evangelist and one copy of War Leader's Call, or the Ocean Frontliners that got removed from the list for it. But interesting nonetheless, and they did have a couple of cards in the sideboard that they were exploring. So they had the Disdainful Stroke for, again, Sunfall. We've got the Cathar Commando for a little bit of artifact and enchantment hate, and then 3 more copies of the Tishana's Tidebinder if you're bumping into a lot of Azorius control, I imagine. So just really quickly, the off meta for this week that I decided to stay away from was Boros Convoke, Mono White Humans, Mono Red Prowess, Mono Red Aggro, Azorius Control, Mono Blue Tempo, Mono Black Aggro, Golgari Midrange, Rakdos Aggro, Mono Black Skeletons, Temur Control, and Celestia Enchantments, which are a lot of the decks that I talk about on Monday whenever I go over my best of 1, best of 3 meta review. And so this one was one that I've been kind of keeping my eye on and waiting for something to kind of hit that 65% win rate above 50 matches. Was the Artifacts build, and we've seen a couple of attempts in Izzet, we've seen a couple of attempts in Azorius, and nothing that really hit that level of hit my requirements, right? And so this week I did find one though, the Jeskai Artifacts by Philly Cheese Steak, which I love the name, and this one had a 62% win rate, 31 and 19, so just barely at that 50 matches. And basically the deck is centered around this Simulacrum Synthesizer that we got in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, being able to create giant artifact creatures every time that you have an artifact enter with mana value 3 or more. Assimilation Aegis was really why the Azorius space, I think, was being explored, and then Izzet was being explored because there's just a lot of natural artifacts in red that we can bring in. Like, we got the Legion Extruder, the Enthusiastic Mechanaut makes all of your artifact spells cost 1 less, and I think this is really the big payoff to being in Izzet. But then we've also got like the Patchwork Automaton that gets bigger every time you're casting an artifact. So I think this has a decent enough plan that it can win outside of actually doing the build a whole bunch of tokens with the synthesizer. And then we, Skitterbeam Battalion can be a win condition in and of itself. And then same with the Platoon Dispenser, being able to create a whole bunch of these little tokens. Now, do remember that for the synthesizer to trigger, you do need your tokens to be mana value 3 or more. So some of these things will not actually trigger the synthesizer. But then you also get the ability for Roaming Throne to give you the double ETBs and the double triggered abilities. And overall, kind of looks like a fun deck to explore. Third on the list is Dino Treasure Hunt by Jazwit. And I thought this one was kind of doing a unique thing, and we've seen kind of like Gruul ramp before, and this leaning more into the Temur space to be able to do some cheeky stuff. So one with the Multiverse is a very expensive enchantment, but we can have a way to kind of cheese it out rather cheaply. So if I can remember how it goes, you're basically going to cycle your a smaller enchantment into a bigger enchantment, and I think it's built off of Oh man, wait, yeah, Chaotic Transformation. There it is. So Chaotic Transformation allows you to exile an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment, and a planeswalker, and one land, and then you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that shares a card type with it. So if you don't have any other artifacts in your deck, you can cycle a treasure token and turn it into a portal to Phyrexia. And similarly, like if you only have one other enchantment in the deck, then you can cycle it into one with the multiverse. And the other enchantment that this deck is running is the Stimulus package. So when it enters the battlefield, you create 2 treasure tokens, and then you can sacrifice a treasure to create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So you get the treasure tokens off of this that gives you the treasure tokens that turn into Portal to Phyrexia, and you get the enchantment that then can turn into one with the multiverse. Sorry, it took me a little bit to like practice that. Probably should have taken a run at it first. But basically, then we're just using treasure and ramp, like the Smuggler's Surprise, to be able to get these really big threats out of our hands for relatively cheaply. So we've got like Kogla and Yodaro, Trumpeting Carnosaur, which has a lot of good targets that it can hit, like the Roxanne that helps us get the treasure, well, the meteorites that are sort of like treasure tokens. Atali is a classic, like big red threat. And so kind of this like cheeky Chaotic Transformation deck. And I don't know if I mentioned, it was 40 and 27 for a 60% win rate. So definitely a unique take, and very excited to see how it goes. So treasure dinosaur synergies. And then the fourth one that will be on the poll here on YouTube that you guys can cast a vote for which one you'd like to see for the 50 match summary is Jeskai Control. And so there was a request to try to find a zombie list, and to be totally straightforward, I didn't find any that were looking particularly good, and I think that the problem with the zombie deck specifically is it's just not doing something better than a different archetype, right? And so like there exists like fun archetypes that you can kind of mess around with, and I could build one, but just didn't get around to it this week. And similarly, the request for doing the kind of like the Yargle and Multani OTK combo with Bartolome and the Rakdos joins up, right? So like I think that if you're going to do the Rakdos joins up, then really the best one to do is just do the 4-color Reanimator, because your other lists, like you could do like a Legends space around that, and it's just going to be slower than the 4-color Legends and weaker to Sunfall, right? So it's one of those things, like I if I had bumped into one that was doing it, I would definitely showcase it. But that being said, many moons ago, somebody was talking about how the Jeskai Control list deserved to be in the best of 1, best of 3 meta review, and it had not been performing particularly well. But I did bump into this list, which was 75 and 41 for 65% win rate by Nada, and so I think that this one, because it is so lightly going into the Jeskai Control space, basically running 1 copy of the High Noon and then 4 copies of the Lightning Helix, it's basically Azorius Control with slightly less counterspells and slightly better removal for stabilization against mono red. And so this deck did particularly well against mono red, Boros Convoke, and Azorius Control, showcasing that the pilot was particularly skilled, because usually the Lightning Helixes don't help you as much in the Azorius Control matchup. But this would be the fourth one that if you'd like me to play Jeskai Control, vote for it here on the poll. So there are also going to be a couple that I just want to talk about briefly. Sometimes I have more than 4, and I can only put 4 on the poll. So these ones will not be included on the poll, but I did think that they were worth talking about, because although that like mono red prowess is, and its close counterpart, the Rakdos aggro strategy, have been kind of typical typical meta decks. They're not really off meta picks. This one was doing enough that the tracker that I like to use wasn't identifying it as mono red prowess. And so this is kind of like mono red prowess and Rakdos burn together, because there's no black mana to play the Callous Sellsword. Kind of makes me want to call this just strictly mono red prowess. But we can see like we've ditched 2 of the Scamps, but not entirely, and then we've got 2 of the Codebreakers, no Picnic Ruiners, Just kind of an interesting list. And Mono Red Prowess was doing particularly well. This one was 58 and 28 for a 67% win rate. Another one that we talked about a while ago was Orsov Life Gain, and Cam C was able to pilot this one for 98 and 47 for a 68% win rate, and really prey on the aggro strategies of both mono black and mono red, if I remember correctly. And I had talked about this one before. This one largely not doing anything new, kind of just leaning into your typical life gains synergies and trying to gain too much life for your opponent to deal with. Another one that caught my attention was Azorius Control by Zep, who went 112 and 61 for a 65% win rate. And this one was basically your typical Azorius Control shell, but then I thought it was kind of, Final Showdown was a card that we got in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, so it was kind of fun to see that one being included. One copy of the Phantom Interference, which instead of the Make Disappear being able to create a token, can sometimes be relevant. And other than that, though, it's pretty much doing the same thing, except for bringing in the Union of the Third Path as its way to kind of stabilize against the early pressure. So I know that there's a lot of people who like the Azorius Control, and then there's a lot of people who don't. But this one looks like a particularly fun list to pilot, as long as you're good at being an Azorius Control mage. And still, one to keep your eye on, and I have seen it kind of been decreasing in popularity, is the 4-color Reanimator deck that's centered on Rakdos Joins Up and Abuelo's Awakening and the Hulking Metamorph. This week we see a couple of changes that I thought were fun explorations. So bringing in one Evoke the Winds to gain control of target artifact or creature, kind of giving an alternative win condition if you are if your combo gets disrupted. And then the other one too is bringing in 2 copies of Surge of Salvation, and this one really good for against somebody holding up instead of casting like Spell Pierce or Negate or something to protect your 1/1 off of Abuelo's Awakening. Surge of Salvation allows you to get rid of most of the point removal, right? So usually it's going to be red removal or black removal. And so Surge of Salvation I thought was a really nice fit. So if you're running the 4-color Reanimator deck, you may want to think about whether or not the Surge of Salvation makes sense to you. It certainly worked for Pico, who was able to take this list 72 and 46 for a 61% win rate. And last but not least was Mono Black by Tikkun the Dragon. And this one was 69 and 35 for a 66% win rate. And I liked where this was going. So this is kind of like a mono black mid-range deck almost, where our top end of our threats are going to be Shieldred the Apocalypse and finishing our opponent off with Corrupt. And so any deck that's running Corrupt is a favorite of mine, because this is one of my favorite cards from way back in the day. Dealing damage equal to the number of swamps that you control and gaining life equal to it. So if you cast this for 6 and you have 6 swamps, it is a 12-point swing. And then we've got just like your typical like black disruption, notably deciding to run the Dread Fugue, which is one that we don't always see. Kind of depends on what's in the meta, but being able to attack our opponent's hand. Black Sun's Twilight for some removal. Just the Caustic Bronco that we got at Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Not really doing your mono black skeletons strategy, nor strictly is it a mono black aggro list. So it's almost like a mono black burn with the Corrupt. So really curious to see how this one would run. And for any of the mono black fans out there, I think you could use this one to some success to climb the ladder. So if you like this sort of thing, I try to do my off-meta picks every Sunday. So sometimes there's only 4, sometimes there's 10. It just depends on what I find throughout the week. So good luck with your matches, and take care, everybody. Maybe I'll see you on the ladder.